Good morning, everyone! It is now 7 a.m. and nighttime is officially over. Time to rise and shine! Get ready to greet another beautiful day!
The first thing you notice about Danganronpa is that Chihiro is a boy. I wish I had been recording that day because I really did call it the second he showed up on screen, and even though it's mostly just kind of funny, I do also think it serves as a unique microcosm of the Danganronpa experience. Fun to puzzle together and feel smart about until you have to wait for the cast to catch up. In the leisurely way they do as you slowly succumb to that despair everyone keeps talking about so much. And then they do something else anyway.
Danganronpa.
Dongus Rongus is a series about Hope's Peak Academy, a super special anime high school for the ultimates, teens who are the best in the world at whatever they do. And really, it can be just about anything. Sometimes it makes for really creative and standout characters like the ultimate team manager. Sometimes the skills are dumb and barely even matter, like the ultimate traditional dancer. Sometimes they don't even really make any sense, like the ultimate breeder. It's not like they even ran out, these are all from the second game. So why does the most prestigious educational institute in the world feel the need to nurture these weirdos and their kooky skills? For one reason and one reason only. So they can die in even kookier ways, reverse-engineered to be the perfect crime for the discerning eye of the ultimate investigator. No, not her. And not him either. No, it's you. Dirty Grandpa wants nothing more than to surprise you, to keep you addicted to its narrative with the promise of greater mechanizations in the oh-so-grisly murders. Do you have what it takes to solve the case? Probably, because this is a visual novel for edgy teens and you can't leave the room until you've checked every clue. So swab up that definitely not censored, normal-colored pink human blood and start interrogating your friends for all of 10 seconds before they needlessly incriminate themselves. It's part of a smorgasbord of seemingly disconnected information that developers throw at you in what can be summed up basically as Red Herring's the video game. That information comes in a fairly steady stream because you're more or less locked into the flow of the plot and the investigations, but it can vary significantly how well the mix of misleading and genuinely useful clues is implemented. What does that mean? Well, imagine you have a partner who refuses to tell you what they already know because something, trust, yada yada, that would make the mystery solvable. Now imagine that happens in every game, more than once, because it does. Some of the clues in Dice and Roller are brilliantly hidden in plain sight. Others are just in plain sight, but you're not allowed to ask about them and nobody seems to care that they exist. Information burial litters every scene in the series, but it just never manages to hold up to any actual scrutiny. The cases themselves range from delightfully clever to downright insulting, but there's always something up old Monokuma's sleeve, and it's usually bullshit. Sometimes vital information is purposely kept from you for no narratively relevant reason. Sometimes the killer is obvious, but the case is so convoluted that the explanation leaves you more confused than when you guessed it yourself. Sometimes you spend literally half the trial discussing architecture because all the NPCs are really bad at spatial relations. All this back and forth, the bizarre but mostly just messy nature of the mysteries unraveling, it's charming and frustrating at the same time, and this is generally what I mean when I say the meta-textual aspect of the game is what stands out and makes it special, but it's too often stretched to the point of tearing. Dabi as a free elf knows it's a game, and it knows you know it's a game, and that you know that it knows that you know that... I'm getting ahead of myself. The metatextual link between the story and gameplay is woven into the writing. It's an organic part of the world. Interacting with the narrative at the development level fundamentally changes the experience, and while you are free as the player to turn off your brain and enjoy the roller coaster that is the killing high school life, it then becomes no different than any standard mystery movie or novel. An interactive story adds almost an element of competition. You're playing four-dimensional chess against Spike Chunsoft, trying to outright them and reverse engineer the plot before it's revealed to you regarding both the individual murders and the overarching story. We'll get back to why that's a problem in itself. Now, meta-textual doesn't just mean the developers straight up talk to you. I mean, they do, and it's cute, but there's more to it than playful fourth wall breaks. The conventions of the genre, and as the series goes on, the IP itself, are twisted around the mold. Unlike the way they bury information, the developers manage to bury the lead in a way that actually fits the game part of their game by immediately anteing your inherent suspicion instead of ignoring it. Of all the trademark Bohemian Rhapsody gimmicks, this sort of visible, unseen hand is probably the most consistently well handled. There are definitive patterns to the gameplay loop, that's what makes it a loop, and Spike Chunsoft does a consistently good job of leaning into them to subvert your expectations, or at the very least to keep you constantly thinking about what might come next. For the most part, playing Spike Chunsoft's game, metaphorically speaking because you are literally playing their game, is a good thing. It adds a special kind of tension that can only exist in the interactive medium, but it comes with a complementary set of limitations. What elevates Old Deuteronomy above and beyond just edgy murder party is entirely in your hands. But the playing out of the narrative, tragically, is not. When a story challenges its audience to figure it out, it assigns itself two very specific hurdles to jump. The first is ensuring that the active participant doesn't get punished for being too far ahead. And the second is that the conclusion, even if ultimately predictable, is still satisfying. When Danganronpa is at its best, it breaks the mold and ducks under these obstacles to genuinely impress you with some wildly inventive ideas. At its worst, though, it tries to jump both at once, and it helplessly faceplants between them, whining on the floor in a compromising fan service position, begging you to forgive its blunder. Any mystery asks you to try to figure it out, but since Double Bubble is a game, information can't be presented the same way. Outside of the visual novel plot segments, there are three aspects of gameplay to Disco Robot: the free-time dating sim, the post-murder investigations, and the class trials. The first is kind of a cute buffer between chunks of story that endears you to the characters who are probably about to die and gives you unique skills to use during the trial minigames. Sometimes it even gives you little hints that may actually help you figure out the murders or larger aspects of the story. The other two, the investigations and trials, are entirely, not even kind of subtly, on rails. This is where Spike Chunsoft tries to have its cake and kill it too. The picture of Dorian Gray doesn't actually care what you already know. Its interactivity is superficial, which means if you discern that Chihiro is a boy in the opening minutes of the game, you're still subject to the entirety of the trial in which it's revealed. That information is supposed to turn the trial on its head, but after twiddling your thumbs for the 20 minutes the cast spends figuring it out, you've likely lost some of your enthusiasm. It's a problem that plagues every case throughout the series, and on a potentially more disappointing level, the overarching story. See, I told you we'd come back to this. For all its twists and turns, D-Word R-Word is aggressively structured. I've gone over how Spike Chunsoft manages to put some creative spins on genre conventions by acknowledging the interactivity of their story, but that doesn't make up for the shortcomings of the story as a whole. The painstaking case of Chihiro's missing genitals doesn't exist because the developers think either you're dumb or they're geniuses. It exists because there's a whole trial to fill and only so many suspects to cycle through before the killer becomes too obvious to keep it up. Dr. Pepper's weakest point is the inability of the narrative to compensate for its inherent limitations. It all feels a little too big for its breeches, elaborate or convoluted simply for the sake of it, and in a way that just can't hold up to the interactive element. The plot often chooses to spasm in every which direction with shock value in mind, but it cheapens the whole experience when the developments continue to double down long past the point of absurdity, especially when it has to waste so much time and tension to do it. In a traditional mystery movie or novel, issues of red herrings, information burial, and general bush beating are easier to hide because the viewer or reader isn't in control. The player of a game is in control, and because of that, it feels all that much more frustrating when Spike Chunsoft takes your cake away from you because they already killed theirs. The cake is control. It's keeping with the having your cake, and the story's a volatile mess, okay? The second thing you notice about Danganronpa, and you can tell we're at the end because I've said the title right, is that it's already over. You're at the end of the story, and all the grisly murders had no thematic cohesion, no specific purpose. The greater mechanizations you were promised are much less interesting than what you've imagined, and most of the holes you've been storing in the vault to be eventually filled just aren't. What little you haven't already predicted feels tacked on and out of place, and most of what you have just doesn't hit hard enough to be worth the wait. You've successfully outwritten Spike Chunsoft, and it leaves a bit of a bad taste in your mouth. As when they're punished by the gameplay for being ahead of the case, the truly active Danganronpa player is punished by the developers for being ahead of the narrative. Ultimately, this series is so eager to surprise, it generally forgets to satisfy. But that's kind of a vague thing to say, so please enjoy as I try to expand on that without actually spoiling anything. I can't truly speak to how predictable the Danganronpa series is. I like to think I'm of above average intelligence, but I'm not a genius, and I'm not really a big fan of mystery stories. I am, however, a writer, and I can say with absolute confidence that these games are not quite as clever as they or their fans think they are. It's one thing to say I feel the theories I came up with were more interesting than what I got. I realize that not everyone plays a game like Danganronpa thinking about what they would do if they had been writing it. The issue is that no matter how you look at it, the story of Danganronpa is fairly muddled and overwritten, and it's so clearly because the team making it wanted to subvert expectations. It's a series so heavily weighted on build-up that the reasonably satisfying answers to its questions are punished for being too simple, catapulted through the bolted windows of Hope's Peak Academy, and the player is left with whatever half-baked backup answer the writing team could come up with. Like everything else wrong with Danganronpa, it's a gimmick that haunts the individual cases and the overarching stories in tandem, and almost always falls out as ridiculous, painfully obvious, or sometimes somehow both. So many of Danganronpa's high points, at least narratively speaking, are sullied by these overindulgent, at times borderline masturbatory twists, and the perpetual beating of that dead horse is what holds them back from being truly great. Because as much time as I just spent complaining about them, the Danganronpa games are actually pretty good. Moment to moment, the writing is spectacular, the aesthetics are original and very stylish, the characters, well, their designs can be a little too busy, but for the most part they're charming and distinctive, and the music, oh my god, the music, it fucking slaps. I think that almost greatness is what inspired me to do this video and talk about these games. I played them with my girlfriend, and while we were in the middle of them, it was like half of what we talked about. They're addictive, they're bizarre and genuinely original. They're a lot of fun, but ultimately, I think they're just a little hollow, and it's so frustrating because they didn't have to be. They try just a little too hard to surprise you, and not quite hard enough to just stay consistent and tightly written. Now, I know that's easier said than done, and of course, I respect Spike Chunsoft for their ambition. There's nothing quite like Danganronpa, and that these games even kind of work is an accomplishment in itself. So, are they worth it? Yeah, for sure. If you let Danganronpa just take you for a ride, you'll probably have a grand old time. But I can't wholeheartedly recommend you play them the way I always thought they were supposed to be played, because it could easily end in disappointment. Not necessarily despair. You should save that for the god-awful anime they made.
Don't worry, Miss Sonia. Soda's here to help. Oh, no. Quit it, you horn dog. Let me go, man. It's our destiny. Come on. You gotta fight the sexy suit. Sweet. Hands off the zipper. Must reach.
Sonia!